The smallest cub came into the world last, slick with fluid and barely breathing, and the mother did not lift her head from the older twins for a long moment. That delay, the time it took her to notice the third body behind her, would become the quiet hinge this entire story turns on. She finally turned, and her tongue moved over the new shape, rough and patient, but her ears stayed half-cocked toward the long grass beyond the den mouth. Something out there had her attention before the cub had her milk. You are watching a birth where the order of arrival is already writing a fate nobody in the pride has guessed yet. The den was a shallow scrape under a fallen acacia, its roots a cage of dried wood above 3 tiny bodies that could not yet see. Their eyes were still sealed, their coats a pattern of faint spots that would fade before they ever learned to hunt. The mother lay with her back to the trunk, and each cub found her belly by smell alone, noses working through the dark. The smallest one, the last one, had to press between his siblings to reach a teat, and even then the grip of his jaws was weak. This is the part most people miss. Survival in a litter is not a test of strength, but of position. He was born in the dry season, when the water holes were shrinking into cracked bone and the herds were pulling away toward distant ground. The pride had not killed in days, and the mother's ribs were visible beneath her hide, her milk thin and slow. She had chosen this den for its cover, not its comfort, and the shade of the acacia did nothing to soften the heat that pressed down from midday. Inside that pocket of root and dust, the smallest cub slept against his mother's flank, his breathing so shallow that the rise and fall was almost invisible. The other 2 squirmed constantly, mewling for milk. He stayed still, conserving what little he had. The first loop opens here, almost without your noticing. Why does a mother lion carry her litter so far from the pride, when the pride means safety in numbers? Extra mouths to watch the horizon? She moved them twice in the first week, carrying each cub by the scruff of the neck across open ground, her head low, her pace deliberate. The first move was short, 100 paces into thicker bush. The second was longer, and she made it at night, when the moon was down and the shadows held no shape. She was not hiding from the cold. She was hiding from something she could smell on the wind, something that had visited the first den after she left it. That something left tracks the next morning, broad and heavy, pressed deep into the soft earth where the mother had lain. A male lion, not of her pride, had circled the abandoned scrape and stood over it for a long time, head lowered, reading the scent of milk and cub. He was looking for exactly what she had taken away. This is the tension that will follow her for months. Every male that finds the cubs is a death sentence, and every day she keeps them hidden is a day borrowed from a threat that never stops searching. The second loop tightens around the smallest cub's own body. Milk competition in a litter of 3 is not gentle, and the older twins, born ahead of him, had already latched and fed while he was still being cleaned. Their bellies were round where his was hollow, their cries louder, their limbs quicker to push him aside. The mother did not intervene. She lay still and let the order assert itself, and each feeding found the smallest cub working harder for less, his mouth finding the teat last, losing it first. If you have ever sat and watched a weaker one lose its place again and again, you already know the math that was stacking against him. But this is where the record starts to resist what you expect. The smallest cub had one advantage the twins did not possess, and it had nothing to do with size. He was the last to open his eyes, and for those extra days he lived in darkness, close to the mother's warmth, undisturbed by the world that was already reaching for his brothers. When his eyes finally unsealed, the first thing he saw was her face, low over him, and he did not startle the way the others did. He was calm in a way that stillness of birth had taught him. She noticed. A lioness reads her cubs the way you read a room, and she began to keep him closer. The third loop is the deepest and the quietest, the mother's own history. She was young for a mother, worn thin by a dry season that had already taken 1 litter from her the year before. That first litter had been found, and she had not been fast enough to move them. You can see the memory in her behavior now, the way she never leaves the den for more than minutes, the way she circles wide before returning, the way she watches the sky as much as the grass. She is not sentimental about it. She is corrected, and the corrected mother makes different choices. The third loop leaves you with one fact worth keeping. The corrected mother makes different choices, and the blind cub is the choice she has begun to guard. Subscribe if you want to stay with this record as it moves from the den into the night, without commentary, turning it into something else. In the comments, write "corrected" if you have seen this pattern before, or "blind one" if the cub's stillness is what you are watching for. On the fifth night, a sound came from beyond the acacia that made her rise in a single motion, ears forward, spine flat. The cubs went silent, pressing into the dirt, and the smallest one, the blind one, made no sound at all while his brothers whimpered. She stood over them, head low, and the growl that came from her chest was not loud, but it carried a weight that stopped the night's insects. Whatever had made the sound did not come closer. After a long minute, she lowered herself again, and the cubs resumed their feeding, and the smallest one latched first for the first time in his short life. His brothers had panicked, he had waited, and in that single difference, something had begun to change. By the end of the first week, the mother moved the litter a third time, and she chose a den that was harder to reach, hidden in a thicket of thorn bushes, where she had to scrape her own flanks to push through. The smallest cub rode in her jaws, a limp bundle of fur, and she placed him deepest in the new shelter before she retrieved his brothers. She had begun to order her own attention, and the smallest one was now always placed where the protection was thickest. This is the part most people get wrong. It was not love that made her favor him. It was the observable fact that he was quiet, that he did not cry out, that he did not draw attention. The new den had a flaw the mother could not see because it was not in the ground or the thorns. It was in the sky. A vulture had been circling the old den for 2 days, riding the heat in lazy spirals, and where vultures gather, other hunters take notice. On the morning of the 9th day, the mother left the cubs to drink at a seep a quarter-mile away, and while she was gone, the big male found the thicket. The cubs went silent the way only prey knows how, and the smallest one, tucked deepest, did not move a muscle while the male's shadow fell across the thorns. He was close enough that the cub could smell him. He was close enough that the cub should have cried out, and did not. The male circled the thicket twice, then stood still, head up, nostrils flaring. He had caught the scent of milk, but the wind was wrong, and the thorns were thick, and after a long moment, he turned and walked away. The mother returned within minutes, moving fast, and she found the litter untouched, and the smallest cub exactly where she had left him. She sniffed him all over, then lay down and let the cubs feed, and the smallest one again latched first. 2 days later, for reasons that have no name in any language, she carried the litter back toward the pride's territory, a decision that seemed to contradict everything she had done so far. She crossed open ground in daylight, which she had avoided without exception. She walked with a purpose that was not fear, and the pride, which had been a smear on the horizon all week, resolved into shape, a coalition of females resting under a rocky outcrop, their cubs a pile of tawny bodies among them. The mother's own sister was there, and the 2 females touched noses, and the smallest cub was placed down in the middle of the communal pile, as if he had always belonged there. This is when you understand the fourth thing. The mother's isolation was not rejection of the pride. It was a calculation about timing, and she had judged the moment safe. Inside the pride, the rules changed. Milk now came from multiple mothers, and the smallest cub found himself competing not with 2 siblings but with 6. All of them older, all of them stronger. The first day, he was pushed to the edge of the feeding cluster again and again, his mouth searching, his legs too short to hold position. The second day was worse, and by the third evening, his ribs had begun to show more clearly beneath his hide. The mother watched from a few paces away and did nothing. The pride's order was not her design to override. The smallest cub had to find his own way back into the circle. He did not fight his way in. He waited until the feeding cluster loosened, until the older cubs began to fall asleep with full bellies, and then he slipped in through the gaps, taking what was left at the edges. It was not a victory. It was not even a strategy he could name. It was the only move available to a body that could not win a contest of force, and he made it without a single sound. By the end of the first week in the pride, the smallest cub had learned something the older ones had not yet grasped, that patience, applied consistently, is a kind of strength that strength cannot defeat. The dry season deepened, and the pride's kills grew further apart. The cubs were now old enough to follow the adults on short walks, and the smallest one trotted at the rear, his legs churning, his head low, learning to move in the long grass the way the mothers did. He did not play as the others played, tumbling and pouncing on each other. He watched. He positioned himself behind the adults when the wind shifted, and he was always the first to flatten himself when a strange shape appeared on the horizon. The other cubs still outweighed him, still pushed him at feeding time, but the gap had begun to narrow in a way that had nothing to do with food. A kill was made, a wildebeest taken down at the edge of the territory, and the cubs were brought in to feed. The adults ate first, as they always did, and by the time the cubs reached the carcass, the meat was mostly off the bones. The smallest cub pushed in beside his brothers and fed for the first time on something other than milk, his small teeth worrying at the sinew, his jaws working slowly. He was the last to finish, and the pride was already moving on when he lifted his head. But his belly was round, and the mother, walking away, glanced back once and did not slow down. That night, a fight broke out among the older cubs over a scrap of hide. The smallest cub was knocked onto his side, and for a moment he lay there, belly exposed, legs in the air. And then he righted himself, and he did not retreat, and he did not cry. He moved forward into the scrum again, and this time he held his ground until the scrap tore and he came away with a piece of it. It was a tiny thing, a piece of skin worth nothing, but it was the first thing he had ever won. And the way he carried it to the edge of the clearing and ate it alone said everything about what was forming in him. He had won nothing of consequence, but he carried it to the edge of the clearing and ate it alone, and that image stays. If you want to watch the rest of what forms in him, subscribe and let the next chapter find you. Leave a single word below for what you witnessed in that moment. The one I would offer is first. The rains did not come when they were expected, and the pride's movements grew wider, the territory's edges stretching thin. The cubs were now nearly weaned, their coats losing the last of the spots, their legs long and coltish. The smallest cub had stopped being the smallest that week, almost without anyone noticing. The gap that had separated him from his brothers had closed to almost nothing, and the hunger that had once hollowed him had been replaced by a different kind of drive, one that did not show in his ribs, but in the watchful stillness of his eyes. He no longer waited at the rear of the column. He walked beside the mother, matching her pace. The moment that would define him came at the water's edge, and it did not come from a predator or a drought. It came from one of the older cubs, a male nearly a year old, who had begun to test the smaller cubs with his weight. He came at the smallest cub from the side, teeth bared in play, and the smallest cub, instead of rolling over, met him with a sudden flattening of the ears and a growl that stopped the older male mid-lunge. The older cub hesitated. The smallest cub held his ground, and for the first time, the older cub looked away first, and the pride's hierarchy, that invisible architecture of dominance, shifted by a single degree in a direction no one had predicted. The mother saw it. She did not react, because a lioness does not celebrate a cub's victory, but she did not need to. The shift was written in the smallest cub's body now, in the new fullness of his chest, in the way he lifted his head when he walked. He had survived the den, the male, the pride, the drought, and the competition, and every one of those survived things was now stored in him as something heavier than muscle. The cub who had been born last, who had been fed last, who had been pushed aside last, had learned the one lesson that would carry him further than any of his littermates, that the world gives its ground to those who do not give theirs back. He grew through the short rains and into the long grass season, and by the time the next dry cycle began, he was no longer the smallest cub of anything. He stood a hand taller than his brothers, his shoulders broad, his mane beginning to push through in uneven tufts along his neck. The mothers had begun to treat him differently, letting him feed closer to the front, tolerating his presence at the head of the column. He had not been promoted by any decision, no ceremony, no single event. He had simply outlasted every contest the pride had offered, and the pride, in its way, had revised its own arithmetic around him. The adolescent males were driven from the pride together, as lion society demands, and the smallest cub went with them, now the largest of his cohort. He walked out at dusk, back toward the territory's edge, and the mother watched him go from the shade of the outcrop, and she did not move. She had done what a mother does. She had kept him alive through the window when almost everything could have killed him, and now the window was closed, and what he did with the rest of his life belonged to him. She blinked once, slowly, and lay her head down on her paws. He was gone for 2 years, long enough for the pride to forget him, long enough for the tufted mane to become a full mane, dark at the base and gold at the tips. He returned on a morning when the light was low and the dust hung thick over the plains, and he came not as a stray, but as a claimant, his head high, his stride unhurried. The resident males saw him from a distance and came to meet him, and the 3 big cats circled each other in the long grass, and whatever passed between them happened without sound. When the resident males turned and walked away, the pride had a new head, and he was the one who had once been fed last. He was not the biggest male anyone had ever seen. That would be an invention, and the record does not trade in inventions. But he was the biggest of his litter, bigger than both twins who had once pushed him from the teat, bigger than any male the pride had produced in years, and the size of him now was the sum of every small thing that had gone right, when almost everything could have gone wrong. The last-born cub, the one who had nearly been overlooked at the moment of his own birth, lay down in the shade of an outcrop at the center of his territory, and when he yawned, his teeth caught the light, and the pride went on about its business around him as if he had always been there. The mother is old now, her muzzle gone grey, her ribs visible again in the way they were when she first carried him through the dry grass. She is still in the pride, still tolerated at the edge of kills, and the big male does not chase her off the way he does the others. He lets her feed closest to the head of the carcass, and he lies near her in the afternoon, and there is no tenderness in it, no sentiment, just a long-standing arrangement of bodies that remember each other. When she rises to move, he rises too and follows at a distance, the way he followed her through the thorns when he could not yet see. The last thing she did, before the season turned, was something the observers almost missed. She had been lying apart from the pride, and when she got up and moved toward a patch of thick bush at the edge of the territory, the big male did not follow. She was gone for most of the day, and when she came back, her flanks were hollow and her step was slower, and she was not carrying anything. The den she had used, hidden in the thorns, was empty now, and the smallest cub she had once carried in her jaws by the scruff of the neck, the one born last, the one who had been fed last, was the one who rose to meet her as she crossed the open ground and walked beside her all the way back to the shade. She lies in the long afternoon light now, her old head resting on a fallen branch, and the big male is close enough that the flies move between them without interruption. He is the largest thing in the territory, and she is the oldest thing in the pride, and between them there is an understanding that requires no words because it lives in the body, in the memory of a time when his entire world was the warmth of her flank and the sound of her breathing. That time is gone, but the body keeps the record of it, the way the ground keeps the record of the rain. The dry heat that season carried a particular stillness, and the old lioness spent more of her hours alone, apart from the communal shade where the pride's females gathered with their new cubs. She had raised her litters, seen them scatter and return, outlived most of the mothers she had once denned beside. The big male, her last-born, ran the territory with a patience that mirrored her own, and when he made his kills, the old ones fed first, an arrangement he enforced with a look rather than a bite. Watching them together, you can trace the full arc of what the litter order did not predict. The twins who had once pushed him aside are gone now, driven off in that first dispersal, their fates unknown to any observer. The mother does not search for them. She does not scan the horizon for shapes that will not come. What she keeps is this one, the last one, the one who stayed close enough to remember her, and their bond is written in the small courtesies of the kill and the shade. The pride's new cubs tumble near the old lioness sometimes, and she tolerates them with the flat patience of age, her eyes half closed, her tail twitching at flies. One of them, a female with a dark mark above her eye, reminds you of the way he must have looked before his eyes, unsealed, blind and quiet in the root cage of the acacia. She watches that cub a little longer than she watches the others, and she does not intervene when the cub is pushed aside at feeding time. She waits. She has seen what waiting can grow. It is tempting, watching the old lioness and her great male son, to read a moral into the shape of their story, to hear a lesson about perseverance or the overlooked becoming the strongest. But the record holds no such instruction. What it holds is simpler: a mother who corrected her choices, a cub who neither fought nor fled, and a pride that revised its own arithmetic around the body that outlasted every test. The rest is weather and time, the two forces that decide more than any single battle ever will. The seasons continue their slow rotation, and the territory's boundaries shift with the movements of the herds, and the big male holds his ground through it all, his mane darkening with each passing cycle. He has won his place, held it against challengers, fathered cubs of his own, and in the evenings he lies at the edge of the outcrop and watches the light drain from the sky the way his mother taught him by example. She does not teach him anything now. She simply is, and her presence is a kind of anchor for him, a fixed point in the shifting mathematics of the pride. The record offers no moral, only that image. The old lioness lying still as a fixed point while her son holds the territory she helped him enter. If you want to stay with the record as it continues through dry seasons and new challengers, subscribe and the next observation will find you when it is ready. Leave the word anchor in the comments if you will carry that stillness or arithmetic if the pride's revised calculation is what stays with you. Either word is a mark of what you saw. Once, in the deep, dry season, a young male came testing the territory's borders, a sleek-bodied stranger with a patchy mane, full of the arrogance of youth. The old lioness watched from the shade as her son rose to meet the challenge, and she did not move, did not call out, did not so much as lift her head from her paws. The young male saw her watching and hesitated, and in that hesitation, the big male closed the distance, and the stranger turned and loped away across the open ground. The old lioness blinked once, slowly, and settled her chin back down onto the branch. If you have ever sat and watched an old animal rest in the certainty of a life fully lived, you already know the weight she carries is not the weight of loss. It is the weight of completion, of a record kept and closed. The cubs she lost are folded into her stillness, the way the drought is folded into the ground, and the one she kept stands guard over her rest, and between them there is nothing left to prove, nothing left to fear, nothing left to wait for. The sun climbs and falls, the herds come and go, and the old lioness grows thinner with each passing moon, her ribs rising sharp beneath her hide, her steps shorter when she rises to drink. The big male slows his pace to match hers now, walking beside her the way she once walked beside him through the thorns, and he does not hurry her, does not push ahead. He has learned her rhythm the way she once learned his stillness, and the two of them move through the long grass as a single slow shape, dark and gold, unhurried. One evening she does not rise to drink. The big male lies beside her through the night, his head close to hers, and in the morning she is still, her flank no longer rising. He does not leave her. He stays through the day and into the next night, and the pride keeps its distance, and the vultures circle high above, patient, reading the stillness below them. On the third morning he rises, and he walks a slow circle around her body, and then he leaves her there in the shade of the outcrop, and he does not look back. The pride accepts his return without ceremony, and he takes up his place at the head of the kills as if nothing has changed, but something has. The fixed point of his world is gone, the anchor of her presence dissolved into the dry earth, and the territory feels larger to him now, emptier, the shade less deep. He lies where she used to lie, in the late afternoon, his head on the same branch she rested on, and the flies move between him and the empty ground and find no second body to settle on. He holds the territory through the next season and the one after, and the cubs he fathers grow and disperse, and the pride continues its slow rotation of births and deaths and migrations. The old lioness is gone from the living record, but her choices are written into the shape of her son, into the way he waits before he acts, into the way he keeps the old ones fed, into the way he does not startle at the world. The smallest cub, fed last, pushed aside, overlooked at his own birth, now commands the graze, and the discipline that carried him there was hers, before it was his. The rains come late that year, and the grass rises thick and green over the plains, and the big male walks his territory at dusk, his mane catching the last of the light, his stride unhurried. He pauses at the edge of a thicket of thorn bushes, the same kind of thicket where his mother once hid him, and he stands there a long moment, head lowered, nostrils flaring at something the wind brings him. There is nothing to find. The thorns are empty. He lifts his head, and he walks on, and the light goes out behind him, and the territory settles into the dark. In the deep grass beyond the outcrop, A small shape moves, a new cub, born to one of the pride's younger females, hidden deep in the thorns with its eyes still sealed. The big male's sister, the one with the dark mark above her eye, lies over it, her tongue moving in rough, patient strokes, her ears half-cocked toward the long grass. She has chosen the thicket for its cover, not its comfort, and she has placed the cub deepest where the protection is thickest, and she has learned this without being taught, the way the body learns from the body that came before it. The new cub is the last of its litter, born after its siblings, slick and barely breathing, and the mother does not lift her head from the older two for a long moment. And then she turns, and her tongue moves over the new shape, and she keeps it closer, the way the old lioness once kept the smallest one close, the way the record handed down its quiet arithmetic. The smallest cub sleeps against her flank, its breathing shallow, and the mother watches the sky and the long grass and the empty ground where the big male walked away. The territory holds its breath in the heat, and the new cub grows in the dark of the thicket, its eyes still sealed, its world, the warmth of its mother's flank, and the sound of her breathing. It does not know that a record was kept before it, that a mother once carried a last-born cub through the thorns, that the body it will grow into was shaped by choices made before it drew its first breath. It does not need to know. The discipline is already in the blood, the patience already in the stillness, and the light keeps passing over the grass, patient, unhurried, waiting to see what this one will become.